it's time to sit back and relax with your favorite drink. And listen. I have the ability to sense the demonic. One hell of a birthday. I've been having a difficult time typing all of this out. Not only am I not a writer, but I've been debating whether or not sharing this so openly is such a good idea. I've had the ability to sense the demonic ever since I was a child, and that's the only reason that I could come up with as to why what had happened to me a week ago hadn't dragged me by the balls, descending me into complete, utter madness. No matter how many times I tried to keep it controlled, it didn't get any easier. I was 12 when I discovered what I could do. With no one to help me, I had to learn how to keep it hidden. I know that it must sound absolutely batshit insane, but it's the truth, whether anyone believes me or not. It was an hour after I'd showered and dressed when I caught a glimpse of headlights from Roland's Jeep as he pulled into the driveway. Roland and I have been roommates for over a year now, after my grandmother passed, but we've been best friends since I was 10, a few months after my parents' tragic deaths. At around 6'2" and handsome with dark brown hair, olive skin, hazel eyes, and an outgoing personality, he was usually the center of attention. At one time I'd even grown feelings for him. Roland wasn't a homophobic asshole, but to avoid any awkwardness between us, I just decided to keep my feelings to myself. Not to mention that Roland seemed to have shown zero discernible interest beyond our friendship. Roland smiled and waved as I made my way over. "Hey, Gavin. Sorry I'm late," Roland said as he reached over to move his duffel bag to the back seat. "Traffic was a freaking nightmare." I shook my head and shrugged. "Don't worry about it, man. Oh, hey, you sure you're still up for tonight? I mean, if you want." Roland shook his head. "Hold up. Are you seriously suggesting that we postpone your 21st? Nope, unacceptable." "Well, what's the big deal anyway?" I asked. "You know, I've had my first drink when I was 16. Well, not only that, but the pandemic really had narrowed the places we could go to. The bowling alley was open, so we decided that was the place to hang out." "Yeah, now you'll be able to drink legally like every other adult. Plus, I've been stuck inside a cabin in the woods for an entire week, so damn right we're going to celebrate." For years, Roland had been going on vacation with his family once a month, the perks of working with his father. His whole family were close-knit, and they usually did a lot of things together, and sometimes I envied him for it. "Oh, and did you forget? Arian will be there too," Roland added. He wiggled his eyebrows, and I smiled warmly at the thought of seeing her in person for the first time. Her and I have been chatting online for months, and we fell for each other immediately. Rather than being the manic pixie dream girl, Arian embodied that cliché with a toughness. She had a unique personality and had a few things in common with me. She had shoulder-length black hair, dipped in pink tips, embellished by pale skin and beautiful icy blue eyes. She told me how her friends would compare her looks to Alexandra Daddario, and quite honestly, I could see it. We arrived at the bowling alley at around 7 to meet up with the others. Arian waved at us as we got out of the Jeep and put on our masks. The petite curly blonde who stood next to her was her best friend, Shelby, and the tall beefy dark-skinned man was Shelby's fiancé, Jasper. I kind of knew them from high school, but we'd barely talked. We were more like ships passing in the night. As far as places went in a small town, the bowling alley was well cared for, but the balls for rent came with small notches taken out, and lanes featured a few divots here and there. Well, in my opinion, it wasn't ideal if you were seeking competitive sport, but the fry oil that wafted from the snack bar was enticing enough to compensate. I walked up to the register where Arian stood with her purse open, apologizing to the plump boarding man behind the counter. "Oh, crap. I must have left my wallet at home or something." "Here, let me," I offered as I pulled out my own wallet and placed enough cash down for both of us. Arian looked up at me as the man handed us 2 pairs of shoes. "You didn't have to do that, Gavin," she said. And she grabbed her shoes and tucked her purse underneath her arm. "Especially not on your birthday." "It's fine. Don't worry about it." I shook my head and grabbed my scuffed-up bowling shoes and thanked the man for being patient with us. The guy just gave me a beleaguered sigh in return. I didn't blame him. If I had to deal with all the children's parties that happen here quite often, I'd probably be a little bitter too. After I'd laced up my shoes, I made my way over to the racks that displayed the different variety of balls. I ran my hand over a few available options before I eventually settled on a black one with a purple printed skull on it. Arian walked up beside me and my chest swelled. "Hey," I said. "Hey." She glanced down at the ball I had in my hands. Nice choice. That's usually my go-to when I come here with my dad. "Oh, do you want this one? I can pick a different one," I said. "It's fine. I just think it's kind of cool that we have similar tastes in balls." She chuckled as she grabbed a crimson ball with golden swirls on it. She held it up, and I watched as her slender fingers slid into the holes. I was about to crack a joke about it when I suddenly felt lightheaded. I glanced around, but nothing really stood out to me until I looked over at the snack bar. A tall, wiry man with shaggy blonde hair stood at the register with his back toward me. His head snapped in my direction, and my breath hitched. I watched as his true face rippled beneath his human facade. His skin was milky white, and his obsidian eyes narrowed at me. I quickly averted my eyes and placed the ball on the rack. "Hey, Gavin, are you all right?" Arian asked, giving me a look of concern. "Yeah, I'm fine. I'm just going to go to the restroom. I'll be right back." As I washed my hands in the sink, I kept replaying that man's face in my head. My heart raced and I felt hot. I needed to calm down. Maybe he didn't see me. Maybe it's all in my head. Maybe. When I looked up at my reflection, something made me stop and take a second look in the mirror. What the hell? I thought to myself as I kept examining my face. My throat squeezed with fear as I stared at the left side of my face. Black, spidery, thread-like lines creeped from my scalp and across my cheek. They interlaced with one another. Instead of my natural grey, my eyes were oily black. What the fuck? Oh, that was a new one. I nearly panicked as I quickly backed away from the mirror, and I yelped when I heard a knock on the other side of the door. "Hey, Gavin, are you in there?" It was Roland. I glanced back at the mirror and expected to see dark lines and black eyes. But there was nothing. It was just my normal face that stared back at me. I debated whether or not to open the door. There was possibly a demon ordering pizza, and there was a good chance he saw me and my face. Another knock. "Gavin, are you in there? You didn't get stuck in the toilet, did you?" I took a few moments before I calmed myself down, placed my mask back on, and unlocked the door. Roland was right outside, giving me a worried look. "Whoa, man, you all right? You're looking a bit pale." I took a deep breath and nodded. "Yeah, I'm fine. Come on, let's start the game already," I said, walking back over to the racks. I just need to keep my head down, and if I see that man again, I'll just have to ignore him. We all sat in the uncomfortable plastic chairs as Jasper stepped up first. We all watched as his ball rolled all the way to the left and right into the gutter. "I thought you were an excellent bowler, babe," Shelby giggled. "Oh, excuse me, just a bit rusty is all." He faked hurt and kissed her on the forehead. "You two are so cute," Arian gushed, and then she turned to me. "Okay, Gavin, you're up." I got up from the chair and strode up to the wooden platform. I held the ball up and peered over at the newly erect pins. I took a deep breath and drew my arm back and swung it forward with a slight twist. The ball spun dizzily as it flew down the lane with a characteristic curve. "Come on, come on," I whispered in a mantra. Luckily, the ball connected with a thunderous crack as all the pins clattered to the floor. "Hey, nice job," Roland and Arian cheered. After our game, the five of us headed to the parking lot. "So, what are you two doing now?" Jasper asked. I zipped up my jacket. "I don't know. Probably headed back to our place, I guess." Arian, who was walking close beside Shelby, twirled on her heels to face me. "You two should come back with us." I glanced over at Roland, who nodded. "Well, I'm up for it if Gavin is, since he's the birthday man." I turned back to face Arian. "Sure, why not?" "Awesome. It'll be fun, and hey, the night's still young." She winked and followed Shelby to Jasper's car, but not before texting me the address in case we got lost. After about 20 minutes on the road, Roland spoke up. "Oh, almost forgot. Will you reach back there and grab the black bag behind my seat?" "Yeah, sure." I grabbed the bag and set it in my lap. "Go ahead and open it." I loosened the red ribbon from the bag and pulled out a rectangular box. Nestled in the black crinkled paper was an obsidian blade. I brushed my fingertips over the silver wolf-shaped handle in awe. The overall length of the blade was 6 inches at most. It was inside a leather sheath pouch with a belt clip. Holy crap, this is... It sure is. I know you've been wanting to get one for a while now. Plus, I also know how much you love wolves, so I had the handle custom made. Happy birthday, Gav. "Thank you so much," I said as I placed the blade back into the box. I was about to place the lid back when suddenly the Jeep began to shudder violently and the back of it slid sideways. I jerked back in my seat and the box fell to the floor between my feet. Roland cursed and gripped the wheel as he reduced his speed and eased over to the shoulder of the road. "What the hell was that?" I asked. I looked out the window, but I couldn't see anything but trees. "Oh, God damn it," Roland sighed and unbuckled his seatbelt. "I think one of the tires must have blown. You all right, Gav?" "Yeah, I think so." "Good. Just stay here. I'm going to check the damage." "Be careful," I called to him as he hopped out of the Jeep. "There could be monsters out there." Roland turned around and gave me a wink. "Don't worry, Gav. I can take care of myself." I rolled my eyes. That's what they say in all the horror movies right before they die. Several minutes later, he opened the driver's side with a frown. "Just as I thought," he grumbled as he reached over to turn on the hazards. "Tires blown to hell." "Oh, damn. I guess somebody doesn't want us to party tonight," I said, sitting back in my seat. "Don't you have a spare?" Roland nodded. "Of course I do, but it might take a while. Call Arian and tell her what happened." "Oh, wait." I opened the compartment and handed him a flashlight. "You should probably take this since it's dark out." Roland looked at it for a moment and then took it, disappearing behind the Jeep again. I grabbed my phone from my pocket and dialed her number. It went straight to her voicemail. I tried again, but once again went to her voicemail. I looked down at the screen. No service bars. "Oh, you've got to be kidding me," I groaned in frustration. Roland came back and opened the door. "Good news is I have a spare. Bad news is that I don't have..." When he saw my expression, he asked what was wrong. "I can't get any signal. That just doesn't make any sense. I mean, I just had service a minute ago." Roland checked his phone as well. "Oh, crap. Same. Well, let's not panic. If I remember correctly, we're less than a mile from the closest gas station. We should head there and call for a tow. Maybe you can try calling her back." "Seems like a good plan," I said. I unbuckled my seatbelt, but before I got out of the Jeep, I opened the box and grabbed the blade. I attached the sheath to my belt loop and zipped up my jacket again, hiding it from view. Roland opened the passenger door and grabbed his duffel bag. We were halfway down the road when I smelled something acrid hit my nostrils. I took a tentative step forward and froze as my foot stepped on a large shard of broken glass. I turned to Roland, who stood rigid in place, his eyes wide. I followed his gaze to the left, and what I saw made my blood run cold. It was Jasper's car, or what was left of it. The front of the car was in a ditch. It smelled awful, and it wasn't the engine or cracked radiator. No, I smelled blood. Lots of it. The whole left side was damaged and open, as if something had ripped through it. The car was empty. I fought through the cold panic that washed over me. I stood with my hands on my thighs, and I started to dry heave. Roland looked around as if he was searching for something. "Okay, Gav, we need to leave right now." I stood up and gave him a confused expression. "Wait, what? No, we have to find them. They could be hurt or—" "Gavin." A high-pitched wail tore through the trees. It was feminine. Oh, God. Arian! Without a second thought, I bolted across the road towards the forest. "Gavin!" I heard Roland screaming for me to stop and come back, but I kept going. I wasn't thinking straight at the time. All I could think about was Arian and every worst-case scenario. My boots sloshed into the muddy ground, and I cursed when I slipped on a pile of leaves as I staggered up a small incline. This caught me off guard since there hadn't been a drop of rain all day. I quickly pulled out my phone and turned on the flashlight. I gasped as I spotted specks of blood intermingled with the dirt. I grimaced as a strong metallic scent hit me. I glanced down and noticed that there was a strange tint to the mud which seemed to lead further into the trees in front of me. In between two trees, I saw her. It wasn't Arian, though. It was Shelby. I gulped, and I tentatively made my way over to her. At the sound, she turned her head toward me, her frantic eyes red and blotchy with tears. She managed a weak moan, and the sound that came out made my chest tighten. Her whimpers were a bleak summation of what she'd gone through before I found her. Her jacket was shredded and covered in blood, and her skin was covered in deep lacerations. My thoughts automatically went back to that possessed man. What if he'd followed us and attacked them? What if he's still here somewhere? The rest of my thoughts were interrupted when I heard my name fall from her bloodied lips. Without hesitation, I knelt down and tried my best to console her as I carefully pulled her into my lap. Deep down, though, I knew that it was a pointless effort. I knew that by her bruised and broken body, it was too late to try and call for help, regardless if I had service or not on my phone. Her blood soaked into my pants, but I didn't care. I had the urge to find Arian, but I didn't want to leave Shelby here to die alone and afraid. "God damn it!" I cried. I looked back down at Shelby, who moved her head slightly upward to meet my eyes. Her torn lips opened and she tried to speak, but her voice was barely audible over the sound of my own heartbeat. I stroked her head. "Shh, don't speak." Shelby ignored me and tried again. I frowned as I bent my head down just enough so that I could hear her. "It's not," she gurgled. "It's not." Her whole body shook as she dragged in air. Her lips quivered, and then finally her shuddering chest eased. And then she was gone. The cold stillness of the woods pressed down on my heart. Tears fell as I placed her head gently on the forest floor and slowly got to my feet. I had to keep going. I broke through the trees and came upon what looked like an abandoned construction site. From the dirt-covered sign, the large building was meant to be a low-income housing complex with the same layout as a hotel. The area around it was barely lit up by the few streetlights. Part of the chain-link fence that surrounded the building was warped and bent as if something very large had ripped its way through it. I shivered. I spotted Arian's purse by the fence and ran over to pick it up. She must be here somewhere. I made my way down the dirt road toward it. I rounded the corner of the building quickly, frantically searching for a way inside. I almost didn't notice that someone had crossed my path until it was too late, and I barely registered the blood-soaked clothes before we collided. Fortunately, I managed to keep my balance and I grabbed the other by the arm. I gasped in relief when I realized who it was. "Holy shit! Arian!" "No!" Arian screamed as she struggled to wrench herself away from me. "Let go of me, you sick—" Arian, stop. It's me, Gavin. At the sound of my voice, she calmed down and glanced up at me. Arian threw her arms around me and buried her tear-stained face in my chest. Oh my God, Gavin, she sobbed. How did you find me? Is Shelby and Jasper alive? What? Hold on, Arian. I cut her off. What happened? Are you all right? She nodded. Yeah, the blood, it isn't mine. We crashed and something attacked Jasper. Shelby and I ran into the forest, but then I lost her and came here. There's an entrance there and I hid, she said as she pointed to a large rectangular window. We need to go. Whatever attacked us is probably still around. I nodded and hoped that by the time we got back to the main road, Roland had been able to call for help. I placed my phone in my pocket. I didn't want to risk the light attracting whatever was lurking in the trees. I reached to take her hand in mine, but before I did, I saw something pass over her face, just like the man's had. Her skin was grey, her eyes inky black, and her mouth split open, revealing razor-sharp teeth. I suddenly screamed and pushed myself away from her, dropping her purse. What's wrong? She asked, startled. She stared at me with human eyes and a human frown. Your face, I stammered. My face? What's wrong with my face? She asked as she took a step forward. Don't come any closer. I know what I saw, Arian, I screamed. No, not her too. Wait a minute, if I was able to sense the man right then and there, why wasn't I able to do the same with her? Well, the reaction I expected from her would be confusion or anger, but none of that happened. Instead, she just smiled, a toothy smile. So it is true, she chuckled. I've been able to blend in amongst your species for a very long time now. No one's ever been able to see through my glamour. That is until I met you. I'm curious. How are you doing it? An icy cold feeling washed over me and my heart lurched. My stomach twisted with a sensation I couldn't put into words. I couldn't even muster up a response, but Arian didn't seem to be waiting for one. Or can it be that you don't even know her? She cocked her head. It almost makes me wonder what other charming little talent she might be hiding. She started to circle around me. She sized me up as her dark eyes fixed on mine. Oh, I've been watching you for a while, and I've got to say I was very surprised you were able to sense one of us so quickly. My heart thudded in my chest. Arian knew this whole time. She knew who that man was too. Was this some plan to get to me? I tried to keep my ability hidden so that I wouldn't draw any attention from their kind. I must have messed up somewhere. Why? Why wasn't I able to sense the thing inside of you? Arian sighed and stopped moving. Thing? Well, first of all, that was rude. I mean, I may be a demon, but I do have feelings, you know. And to answer your question, I honestly don't know. Although unlike the one you saw at the bowling alley, I don't need a vessel in order to walk topside. Oh, what a mess this whole thing has become. I knew I shouldn't have used a demon fresh out of hell. They have more of a difficult time controlling themselves. Collateral was unavoidable. My eyes widened as the jarring realization slammed into me. It was you. I took a few steps back. You're the one behind all of this. Arian crossed her arms over her chest. Wow. Congratulations, you figured it out. I clenched my fists and stood there, horrified by her blatant disregard for her friends. I wondered for a moment if the real Arian was in there somewhere, experiencing the horrors this thing did. Tell me something. Is she still in there? Didn't you listen to anything I just said? The girl you've been talking to has been me all along, genius. The real Arian's gone. Now, you can either come with me willingly or... I'm not going anywhere with you. Roland's called the cops and they'll be here soon. I really hoped she would fall for the bluff. Oh, I highly doubt that. While you were running through the woods like an idiot, you left your friend alone and vulnerable. Poor thing's probably roadkill by now." At that moment, rage poured through me, hot and fast as it twisted inside me and set me alight with the strength and burn of it. I could feel something primal and dangerous stir within my chest. Before she could react, my fist connected with her cheek. "Oh, you bitch," I screamed. "I'll fucking kill you." I wanted to rip her eyes out of her skull. I barely registered the pain in my hands as I landed another blow to her face hard enough that she staggered backwards. She snapped her head in my direction, and her face contorted into a snarl as she wiped the blood from her mouth. "I was going to offer you a choice, dumbass." Her voice deepened, and it sounded like something was bubbling from her throat. She glanced down at herself. "Oh, this body is too much of a hindrance. I must take you in alive, but if I happen to rip off a limb or two to keep you from struggling, then so be it." A freight train of horrified amazement slammed into me as her whole body expanded and stretched. She tore roughly at her clothes and threw the material from her body just as her breasts flattened, replaced by a broad and muscular chest. The demon was vaguely humanoid, with a tail that slightly resembled that of a xenomorph's. It stood around 8 feet tall on reptilian clawed feet. Black veins pulsed beneath grey skin. Bat-like ears twitched as it dragged in a deep breath through slitted nostrils, and its mouth split open, adorned with a row of sharp, jagged teeth. Its black eyes were trained on me. I felt a sudden wave of dread as I stared up at the large, monstrous being in front of me. The demon lunged forward and pulled me in close. I gagged when I caught the coppery odor of recently spilled blood. A large hand grabbed my chin and I flinched as one of its claws sliced into my cheek. I cursed as I threw myself backwards and tugged hard, but it was as useless as a fish struggling on a line. My whole arm ached and I knew that if I kept it up, I'd dislocate it. The demon made a low, guttural growl, but before it could do anything, it paused and lifted its head toward the forest. While it was distracted, I managed to get underneath my jacket and loosen the dagger free from my waistband. I plunged the blade into its neck. Blood spilled from the wound and the demon let out a roar so loud that it made my insides shudder. It released me and recoiled. It thrashed on the ground as it grabbed at the blade. Everything hurt, but I managed to get on my feet, and even though it was tempting, I didn't stick around long enough to admire my handiwork. I also felt a wave of sadness, knowing that I wouldn't be able to get my blade back. Ignoring the pain, I turned and bolted toward the building. I made my way over to the window and quickly hauled myself inside. Without any hope of rescue, I had no other choice but to find someplace to hide. I scanned the area and noticed that some of the floors were dilapidated and a few were blocked off by debris. The ceiling sagged in some places, and it seemed that the creeper vines were all that held them up. I turned a corner and noticed stairs leading up to the second floor. I quickly made my way over. Unfortunately, I wasn't quick enough. I barely made it up the last step when a large, clawed hand grabbed my right leg. How the hell did it get in without me hearing it? Oh, and I didn't kill it. The wound on its neck was in the process of healing. I panicked and slammed my free leg into its face. The demon let go of my leg and tumbled down the stairs. It would have been comical if not for the fact that I was in serious danger. I bolted down the hallway and turned right. I ran into one of the rooms and shut the door behind me. By the light of the moon, I noticed that I stood inside a large room with walls covered in graffiti. Dusty furniture was propped here and there, and wooden pallets lay broken across the room from a decayed, mold-infested mattress. There was a window overlooking the woods. I ran over to it. I tried to open it, but it wouldn't budge. I sobbed and collapsed to my knees. My thoughts were hazy at that point, worn thin by exhaustion. I knew that all of this was futile, and I was dealing with someone far more powerful than I was. My resignation broke as soon as I heard movement from outside the door. I forced myself to my feet, driven only by an instinct to survive. Oh, the demon tore through the door. I screamed as it lunged for me again, and we both fell onto the mattress. It snarled as it pulled me under it with its tail. The demon lowered its head, and I managed at the last moment to wrap both my hands around its throat in order to try and keep its demonic mess of a mouth at bay. I could feel its hot breath brush against my face, and the tendons and sinewy muscles in its neck bulged. The demon suddenly paused, with its jaws open inches away from my shoulder. It hovered there for a moment, unnaturally still for a predator that had already caught its prey. An oddly unfocused look passed over its face, and it growled. "What the hell are you?" Before I could say anything, a loud, angry roar reverberated around us. I blinked as the demon was thrown off of me. My vision refocused, and my eyes landed on the two large figures in the middle of the room. The second one was a creature almost the same height as the demon. The beast was bipedal and also vaguely humanoid. Its fur was dark and coarse along its arms and legs, but soft and lighter on his chest and abdomen. His legs jutted out of human hips, but his feet were large paws. His ankles had the forward hock joints of a wolf. His body was wide and muscular, but he still retained an almost slender shape. His face was nightmarish. A werewolf. I looked between these two powerful beings, and that was the moment I truly found out that humans never really held the top of the food chain. And if that wasn't a giant kick to the evolutionary chain's balls, then I don't know what was. The two of them collided. The werewolf managed to pull the other into a headlock. Its golden eyes pierced into me for one heart-stopping moment before he flipped the demon over his head. I could have sworn that the whole place vibrated from the impact. The demon rebounded onto its feet with a snarl, and both of them sprang away from each other. I groaned as I moved into the shadows, relieved that they were too preoccupied with trying to kill each other to pay any mind to me. The werewolf snapped his jaws and launched himself at the demon. The demon dodged the attack and threw the werewolf down onto the pallets with a sickening crunch. I bumped my arm against something and winced. The demon turned its head back to me and advanced. I panicked and scurried backwards. The werewolf rolled off the broken wood and grabbed the demon by the tail. It managed to dig his fangs into the demon's shoulder. With a shrill cry of pain, the demon twisted and took another swipe of its claws down the werewolf's chest. The werewolf howled and backhanded the demon across the face, and the force sent it reeling into the wall. The werewolf moved toward me in a protective stance, his eyes trained on the demon lying in the hole in the wall. The demon slowly got to its feet, and with a rage-filled beastly roar, it launched itself out of the window. I stood up carefully and turned my gaze to the werewolf still in the room with me. "Thanks," I stammered. We're cool, yeah?" His golden eyes seemed to look over me, and then he growled. "Nope." God, think, Gavin, think, I thought, looking wildly around the dark room for an escape. I glanced over at the window and ran over to it. I hoisted myself up onto the thin rectangular ledge of the window, and even though I wasn't religious, I prayed to whatever deity that I didn't simply topple over to my death. I cried out as a clawed hand latched onto my left leg. In my haste to kick out of his grasp, my hands lost their grip of the roof below me. I felt several claws slice into the skin of my leg as I fell backwards, over the roof and down to the gravel below. I could have sworn the beast whimpered, but the pain was too much, and darkness pulled me under. Part 2. The Cabin in the Woods. My eyelids felt as if someone had threaded tiny anchors into each of my eyelashes, impossibly heavy and unwilling to move. I imagined that I'd be tearing skin as I peeled them open to blink for the first time in what felt like days. I licked my lips and noticed how dry they were. I dragged in a deep breath, and I slowly opened my eyes. With a slight grunt, I hauled myself into a sitting position and winced. Oh, damn it. Okay, that was a mistake because everything ached. There was a switch near the miniature lamp on the dresser, and I squinted as the ceiling lights flickered to life. There was an oak desk across from the twin-side linen sheet bed I was tucked in. Next to that stood a large walk-in closet built into the wall and a restroom near the door. I glanced down and noticed that my clothes were replaced with a plain grey tank top and sweatpants. I subconsciously reached for my phone to check the time, but it wasn't on the nightstand. What sat on there, however, was a black pitcher, a ceramic cup, and my wallet. Careful of the slight weakness in my arms, I poured myself a drink. I licked my dry lips and sent a thanks to no one in particular as I drank the water down like it was lifeblood. I suddenly winced again when I moved my leg. Curious, I tentatively removed the thin blanket and rolled up my pant leg, revealing a bandage wrapped tightly around my calf. I took in a few shaky breaths as the recollection of that night doused my veins in ice water. I placed my head in my hands to try and calm the spiral of emotions as tears threatened to spill down my cheeks. I heard a knock and the door opened. I sniffed and rubbed my eyes. "Oh, you're awake," said a female voice. "Roland will be relieved. He's been freaking out over you since he brought you here all bloody and unconscious." I turned around to the source of the voice. A petite young woman with curly, shoulder-length brown hair, tanned skin, and grey eyes stood in the doorway. She wore black scrubs and a grey mask, carrying a steaming cup in her hands. She closed the door and walked over to me. "Roland, wait, he's alive. He's here?" A huge wave of relief washed over me, knowing that my best friend was all right. "Do you know where he is now? I need to see him." Ignoring the pain, I moved to push the rest of the sheets away from me, and that's when she held out her free hand toward me. "Whoa, hold on. I don't know where he is right now, but I'm here to check on you and make sure you drank your medicine when you woke up," she quickly explained as she motioned to the pitcher. "But hey, since you already did, I guess that makes it easier for all of us. Well done, you." I blinked and glanced nervously at the pitcher beside me. I hadn't even realized that it had been anything but water. "You should probably eat," she added. "You haven't eaten anything for almost 2 days." Well, that made sense. Now that I was awake, I could feel a painful gnawing sensation in my stomach. It was a clawing hunger more intense than anything I'd felt before. But then again, I'd never fasted either. You don't happen to have any horses around here, do you?" I asked sheepishly. She shook her head and grinned. "Nope, sorry. But if you drink this," she offered me the mug, "your hunger will go away." I decided quickly that being drugged at this point wouldn't make much of a difference. I did as I was told and took the mug from her. It was filled with a thick, dark liquid. I crinkled my nose. The substance smelled of herbs, spices, and something rich that I couldn't place. I took a sip. "Wow, this is actually really good. What is it?" "One of the doctor's famous recipes, and they work wonders," she said. "Well, I'd better go. I'll make sure to tell Roland that you're awake when he gets back." After she left, I placed the mug on the nightstand and slid delicately to the side of the bed, being mindful of my bandaged leg. I flinched when my bare feet had made contact with the floor. I walked stiffly into the restroom. It was clean and depersonalized. I opened the small mirror above the porcelain sink. Rust marks tackled the metal shelves that showed where things had been not long ago. I stared into the mirror and inspected my face as I tore the bandage from my cheek. When I turned my head, however, the area where that demon had sliced me looked more like a small scratch. The skin around it was still a little tender and pink. How was that even possible? I could have sworn that I received a pretty nasty cut to my face. Well, I'm not going to complain, but the last time I checked, I didn't have any special healing powers. Maybe it wasn't as bad as I'd thought. I examined my face and breathed a sigh of relief. At least my face still looked normal. The sound of footsteps broke me out of my thoughts. I was just leaving the restroom when the door opened. Roland rounded the doorway with his hand against the frame. The other was holding a bundle of clothes, and he looked exhausted. I've never seen him like this before. I felt a pang of guilt run up my spine. I truly believed that I was protecting the ones I loved by keeping my ability a secret, but, well, I was wrong. People had died that night. Roland could have died that night. Before he could open his mouth, I pulled him into a hug. My whole body began to shake as I sobbed. I'm so sorry, Roland. Roland hugged me close. Hey, it's all right. You're safe now. There's no need to apologize, Gav. I let him comfort me for a minute before we both broke apart. How did I get here? I brought you here, he answered simply. Wait, but how? There was some animal in there with me. How did you manage to survive? Roland gave me an apprehensive look. That was me, Gav, he said gently. I'm a werewolf. You're what? I said, perplexed as I struggled to really understand what Roland had just told me. But I would have known, right? All these years that I've known him, I would have seen some sort of sign, and it wasn't like I was ignorant of the real world or what was really out there. I knew demons existed, so I was always open to the possibility of other supernatural beings, especially after witnessing a full-on werewolf versus demon showdown that night. But knowing a werewolf personally felt so surreal. I'm telling you the truth, he said. Why would you lie about something like that? I asked. I immediately felt like a hypocrite as soon as the accusation left my lips. I was so upset at Roland for keeping a secret from me when that's exactly what I'd been doing. My not-so-righteous indignation drained out of me, and I walked over to the edge of the bed and sat down. Roland took a moment before he came over. He placed the clothes on the table and sat down beside me. I didn't actually lie to you, he refuted slowly. I just omitted certain parts of the truth. Those are some big omissions, Roland, I said. Yeah, all right, but I swear to you that nothing was an out-and-out lie. He noticed the look on my face and frowned. Please, Gavin, don't be afraid of me. I'd never hurt you. Then he glanced down at my calf. Yeah, I swear that was an accident. I felt the demon was still out there and I panicked. I held up a hand. Look, I believe you. I'm just trying to process all of this. Why didn't you tell me? Well, I'm bound by Lycan laws, he explained. But you deserve to know because of what happened that night. Oh, makes sense, I guess. So, where am I? I asked. You're in a hospital. Really? I asked as I glanced around. It doesn't look like any mundane hospital I've seen. Well, that's because it isn't. This place is an institution that provides medical treatment for sick or injured, supernatural beings like me. You know how my mom's a nurse? Oh, yeah, she works here, and sometimes I volunteer once in a while, he stated. We even have transportation and daycare, among other things. Are you serious? I asked. What if a human were to accidentally walk in? Well, they wouldn't be able to, Roland said. There's a glamour over the whole building, so humans would only see a private business. That's the whole thing. That's pretty cool, but why am I here? I'm human. Before Roland could answer, my stupid leg bumped against the nightstand, eliciting a curse from me. I can fix that, Roland said. He jerked his chin toward my bandaged calf. Your leg, I can heal that. Injuries caused by Mycan tend to take a little longer to heal. How? I asked. Just relax, Roland said gently. He carefully lifted my leg and placed it over his lap. He rolled up his left sleeve and reached into his pocket and took out a small knife. Oh, hold on, what are you doing? I panicked as I tried to pull away, but his grip was strong, unnaturally strong. He glanced over at me as he removed the bandage. I grimaced as I saw the 3 large claw marks. Relax, Gavin, he repeated. He took the blade and sliced his palm open. Blood pooled and dripped down from the wound. He carefully placed his hand on my leg. And then I felt it, a strange, warm sensation spread around the area. My first reaction was to grab my leg and hiss, but I fought to keep myself still. You okay? Roland asked. You just sliced your hand open and placed it on my leg like some weird blood oath, but yeah, it doesn't hurt at least, I said. a feeling like having my leg wake up from falling asleep spread slowly around it like pins and needles as the skin beneath his hand closed. The sensation eased and then disappeared completely. What was that? I gaped at him. It's called pain transference, he explained as he released my leg. We werewolves have the ability to absorb the pain of others and even heal them by our saliva or blood. Pretty neat, eh? Yeah. Hold on. I'm not a werewolf now, right? I asked. Roland chuckled and shook his head. No, that's not how it works. Humans turning are very rare. Did it hurt at all? You know, when I healed you. He leaned back slightly. Not really, but it depends on the severity of the injury. I'm guessing you've worked with worse, huh? I asked. Yep, I have, and I'd happily do it again, he said. You're a masochist, I scoffed. Roland laughed, and I felt a smile begin to tug at the edge of my lips. Hang on, what about this one on my cheek? I pointed to the light scratch. I could have sworn it looked pretty bad, and now it looks almost completely healed. Roland got close, and his brows knitted together. Are you sure? I mean, it didn't look that bad when I brought you here. Damn, I was kind of hoping to have supernatural healing powers. That would have been awesome. Okay, well maybe I was just... Suddenly the reality of what had happened came back to me, and I stared down at my newly healed leg. Hey, Roland, what happened to their bodies? I asked slowly. Roland sighed and took a few moments before he spoke. After what had transpired, he was able to get a hold of his father. Whomever his father had called, well, they'd taken care of it. He didn't go into too much detail, but whatever these people did, they were able to make it look like a car accident. Even though lying to their families didn't really sit right with me, I was relieved that the bodies of Jasper and Shelby were found and their families would be able to give them proper burials. I asked about Arian, the real Arian, but he just told me that her body was never found, as far as he knew. This must all be so much to take in. I bet you feel like everything's going to hell in a handbasket, he said. I looked away from him. To a normal person, it'd seem that way, but I've been dealing with it since I was a child. What do you mean? Roland cocked his head. I've been able to sense demons ever since my parents' deaths, but now for some reason it's getting harder to control. That night the demon said it needed to take me alive, but I don't know why. Jesus, Gav, I didn't know, he said. No one did. I mean, who would have believed me? I believe you, Roland said as he patted my shoulder. So will my father. Oh, that reminds me. After you're dressed, he wants to see us. My eyes widened. Elijah? Roland nodded. Yeah, he's the pack leader. Well, of course he was. Who else but Roland's imposing father would be the alpha werewolf? Roland and I left after hours. Part of me was curious as to what kinds of supernatural creatures they had for patients, but Roland decided that we should go out the back door. After an hour, we pulled up to the edge of the property line. Before we continued down the road, Roland turned to face me. All right, Gavin, I need you to listen to me very carefully. Yeah, sure, I said, warily. Whatever you see, just don't panic. You're safe here, he said. I won't, I said. I doubted that I convinced him, since I didn't even convince myself. I briefly wondered if his wolfy senses could detect dishonesty, but I didn't ask. Are you sure? He said skeptically. You look a little shaken. Look, if it'll make you feel any better, don't look out the windows, he said as he began to drive down the road. Well, curiosity got the better of me. I turned to look outside, and I instantly regretted it. Several pairs of amber eyes watched us as we made our way down the road. I quickly averted my eyes. Street lamps lined the road as we drove deeper into the woods. The beasts that were lurking in the trees had vanished, but the feeling of being watched stayed. There were a few cabins that I could see scattered throughout the trees, and dirt paths trailed between them. They were spread out, and some of them looked well lived in, with small gardens filled with a variety of little trinkets. We pulled up in front of a massive lodge overlooking the lake. Even though I've known Roland and his parents for years, never once had I visited this place. His parents were like family to me, and now that I think about it, I kind of felt a bit hurt that the ones I trusted didn't seem to trust me with this until now, but I also understood that they had their reasons. I kept close to him as we made our way up the steps. The doors to the lodge were heavy oak, carved with beautiful forest patterns. Roland grabbed his keys and unlocked the doors. The doors opened up into a large room with a high ceiling. A chandelier made out of deer antlers hung in the center. Comfortable-looking chairs and cushions sat around a wide circular table in the center of the room. There were also leather couches in front of a marble fireplace mounted into the wall. The floor was some sort of shiny stone, maybe granite. There was a staircase leading up to the second floor. The whole place seemed well lived in. This is where my father holds PAG meetings. The hallway through the doors to the left leads to the kitchen, and upstairs is where my family sleeps. There's 20 of us in my father's pack, and some actually live here, he explained. I was about to say something when someone entered in from the kitchen. The guy looked to be about our age, with shoulder-length dirty blonde hair, pale skin, and green eyes that were narrowed in my direction. He crossed his arms over his chest. "Emery," Roland said as he moved closer to me, "do you know where my "You should have called, Roland." The guy, Emery, scowled. Roland sighed, clearly annoyed. "I already informed my father. One of the demons had some ability to cut service to our cell phones. There wasn't any time to come up with a plan." Emery ignored him and took a few steps forward and jerked his chin in my direction. "You even exposed yourself to a human. You of all werekin should know better." Roland suddenly bared his teeth at Emery, and I could have sworn that his eyes turned an amber color. "I told you that I had no other choice," he growled. Emery's eyes also seemed to bleed amber, but he took a step back. For some reason they were after him and were ordered to bring him back alive. And my father wants to know why. "You've got to be joking, right?" Emery scoffed. "Why the hell would demons want a human kid, and a weak-looking one at that?" I felt a prickle of annoyance at this asshat's insults. "I'm 21, actually," I said calmly. "Don't insult me again. If you haven't figured it out, I've had a really bad couple of days." "Is that a threat?" Emery growled. "Back off, Em," Roland warned with a growl of his own. "He managed to wound one of them, and he fought to stay alive long enough for me to get to him." "No." Emery's face tightened. "You're the one who—" "Enough." A booming voice filled the room, dripped with authority. The three of us paused, and Roland and I turned around. Elijah and his wife Natalie eyed us from the entryway. Natalie was tall and slender, but was still inches shorter than Roland. Her auburn hair spun in ringlets past her pale skin. Her hazel eyes relaxed as they settled on mine. Elijah was a tall, muscular, dark-skinned man with short black hair speckled with grey. His dark brown eyes narrowed. Even though Elijah's physique was imposing, he was a really cool guy if you knew him personally. I guess as the alpha male, he had to be fierce, stern, and at times deadly. The realization that Roland, my best friend, was a werewolf really brought a definite undercurrent of excitement. The heart-stopping terror that had happened a few nights ago faded into interest, into thrilling newness, like playing a new game for the first time or unlocking an achievement. Only better, because this was real. Also scarier, because this was real. Elijah cleared his throat. "I'm going to talk with Gavin," he said. "Alone," he added, firmly when Roland began to follow. Emery left first, not even giving me a second glance. Natalie gave me a quick hug. "Oh my goodness, I'm so relieved that you're all right, love. Roland, sweetie, I'll need your help with something in the shed," she said as she headed toward the kitchen. Roland gave me a reassuring smile and followed his mother. "Come and sit down, Gavin," Elijah invited. I still felt slightly irritated after everything that had just happened to me. Being angry was easier than being upset, but Elijah didn't deserve either from me. I sat down on the couch near the fireplace. A lump formed in my throat and I placed my head in my hands. "I'm sorry," I apologized. "I didn't mean to cause any inconvenience." Elijah sat down next to me and placed a hand on my shoulder. "I don't blame you, son. You've been through a hell of a lot," he stated calmly. "Is there anything I can get you? Something to drink?" I smiled weakly and shook my head. "No, I'm fine, thank you. I just don't know what I'm going to do now." Elijah leaned forward and clasped his hands together. "Well, perhaps you could tell me what happened. The demons that you and Roland dealt with. Was that the first time you've seen a demon?" "No, not like that. I mean, I've been aware of their presence ever since I was a child." Elijah asked me to elaborate. He listened very carefully as I spilled the beans, and he never took his eyes off mine. Elijah's brows knitted together. "I know that this next question may be personal, but I need you to answer if you can." I nodded. "Did anyone in your family have this ability? Your mother or father, perhaps?" "Well, no, not that I can remember. I mean, my family were completely normal," I answered. "Are you sure?" A little voice whispered in my head. "You were only a child when your parents died. You were barely old enough to know anything about them." Elijah pursed his lips. "Normal people, well, you were very young when your parents died, so it's likely one of them could have passed his ability to you. However, this is all just speculation on my part." I slumped back against the sofa. He continued. "Demons are repulsive beings, and not usually known for keeping a human alive unless it's to possess them. This situation is truly very odd." "Or maybe it's because of what I can do, and they don't like that," I added, "and they want to know how I'm doing it." Elijah patted me on the shoulder again and stood up. "That's a definite possibility." "Do you think it's safe for me to go home?" I asked. Elijah shook his head, concerned. "No, at least not until I have someone go over and check the house. We have a guest room available for you." Even though Elijah used to own the house, I wasn't at all sure I wanted someone I didn't know in my home. But there was no reason for me not to trust him. I was just being paranoid. Surprisingly, the last question that came out was, "Why did you allow Roland and I to become friends? I mean, weren't you worried that I'd find out the truth about you?" "There were a few in the pack who believed it wasn't a wise decision, but if some of us are to live among humans, we can't shut ourselves off from them entirely. We even have methods of concealing ourselves," he said. "Now I'll have someone take you to your room. Tomorrow I shall do what I can to find out why demons have taken such an interest in you." I nodded. And I suddenly longed for those days when I pretended to live in ignorance. After what had happened that night, I'd probably never feel safe again. Part 3. When I woke up the next morning, I could hear birds chirping from outside my window, but I didn't immediately open my eyes. I merely sighed as I sank deeper into the fluffy comforter and very luxurious soft mattress, but the memories from the day before caused me to squint one eye open. I lifted my head and surveyed the room. Soft sunlight filed in through sheer drapes. In the light, the guest bedroom seemed light and airy. The white furniture and grey walls were a nice contrast. There was an alarm clock that showed it was mid-morning, and I noticed that there was a note beside it. "Went out to buy some groceries. There are clean clothes and a towel in the bathroom. Roland." I set the note back down on the nightstand and got out of bed. I showered, and the hot water felt great against my skin. Once I was done getting dressed, I made my way over to the bedroom door. The hallway outside my room was empty, and I would have guessed that there was no one home if not for the smell of someone cooking. I closed the door behind me and slowly walked down the stairs toward the kitchen. The kitchen was big, just like the rest of the house. The cabinets were painted grey, and the counters were a light, polished wood, and the backsplash was alternating taupe and black mosaic tiles. Roland had his back to me, taking something out of the oven. He swiveled his head around like he'd already known that I was standing there the whole time. He probably did. "Good morning, Gaff. I made breakfast pizza, your favorite. How are you feeling?" I scratched the back of my head and shrugged. I took a seat at the table and poured myself some coffee. "Definitely better than yesterday." I looked around and noticed that Roland and I were the only ones eating breakfast. So, where's everyone else? Oh, my mom took an early shift at work and Dad has a meeting around 1, he explained as he came over. He placed the pizza on the table and a bottle of ranch. He knew me so well, and I happily grabbed 2 slices. I realized right then that I was absolutely ravenous. Damn, hungry, aren't you? Roland smiled in amazement. That medicine from the hospital should have kept you satisfied enough, but you're acting like you hadn't eaten at all. I don't know, I said, between mouthfuls. Guess I'm just really hungry. You gonna eat? Nah, I already had breakfast earlier, he said. Maybe you should chew your food. I don't want you to choke. I swallowed and pointed my half-eaten slice of pizza at him. A piece of egg fell off of it. I blame you for making this one of my favorite foods. God, you're an amazing cook. For making something so quick and easy? He laughed. Yeah. I dipped my slice of pizza in the ranch. Also, you're the only one who usually cooks our meals at home anyway. Oh, that's true. What would you do without me? He smirked. Well, I don't know. Get murdered by demons? I said. When I saw the smirk on Roland's face dip into a frown, I immediately regretted it. I placed the slice of pizza on the plate. Okay, that was in bad taste, but at the same time, it's the truth. If you hadn't got there when you did, I don't know what would have happened. Well, you don't have to worry about that. You're here with me and you're safe. It'll be okay, right? How? I thought to myself. How's it going to be okay? This isn't some video game or a horror film where everything is play pretend. This is real life. I mean, normal humans don't defeat demonic beings in real life. They die. I wasn't equipped for this. As far as I knew, I didn't have any awesome superpowers, and before anyone says anything, being able to sense demons is not an awesome superpower. It's a curse, and because of it, people had died. People had died because I played ignorance. Or maybe if I was smarter, more careful, and kept to myself, none of this would have happened. Hey! Roland snapped his fingers lightly, breaking me out of my thoughts about how unfair my life was. Stop that. I can practically hear you thinking. As I was saying, while you were sleeping, my father was able to get into contact with someone that might be able to help. Really? I asked, and my posture straightened. Who is it? This guy named Mort. He wants us to meet him at his place after breakfast, Roland explained. Oh, and I was meaning to give these back to you. I kind of forgotten. You seemed exhausted, so I decided to wait until you woke up. He walked out of the kitchen for a moment and then came back with a black box. The box that held the blade he got for me for my birthday, and laying right next to it was my phone. A wave of relief washed over me as I brushed my fingers over the blade. I thought I'd never get it back. Roland, you're seriously the bestest best friend ever, I said with gratitude. I know, he smiled. It was around 1 when we grabbed an Uber and headed out to meet this Mort. Roland told me that his mother was borrowing the Jeep since her car was in the shop. Through the thick brush that bordered the driveway, a small red house came into view. This is the place, the driver announced. Roland thanked the lady and slung his duffel bag over his shoulder. As the car drove away, we walked up to the house. Roland took the lead and stepped up to the door and knocked twice. How long was it appropriate to wait on a stranger's porch? I wondered. As far as I knew, Elijah told him that we were coming ahead of time, so this guy should be home. I was just about to suggest that Roland ring the doorbell when I heard the door unlock from the other side. A short, plump man with blue eyes and dark, mousy hair greeted us. Yes, he said in a gruff voice. I'm Roland, and this is Gavin. My father Elijah told you we were coming. Mort eyed the two of us almost warily. Then he nodded and opened the door wide enough for us to come inside. The home was compact, with a small kitchen to the right and a bedroom straight ahead. The living area was small, cluttered with papers, books, and other various items. A flat-screen TV hung above the mantel. Mort motioned us to the couch next to a coffee table which had a large plate of mini sandwiches and tea. He sat across from us in a cushioned chair. Please help yourselves, Mort said. I grabbed one of the sandwiches from the plate. Even after 2 slices of breakfast pizza, I was still kind of hungry. "Wow, these are delicious," I commented. The cucumber had just the right amount of mayonnaise and pepper, and I decided to take 2 more and put them on a small paper plate, shamelessly. Mort gave me a smile. Roland sipped his tea and took a bite from his sandwich. I took a large gulp of tea and reached over to carefully put my empty cup back on its saucer. I'd barely let go of the handle before Mort pounced on it, snatched it away, and peered into it intently. I sat back into the sofa. "Hey, if you see the Grim, don't tell me," I said. "I don't want to know." Roland placed his cup down and leaned forward as Mort examined the cup and scowled with frustration. "That's odd. There's nothing for me to read here." "Wait, you're a fortune teller?" I asked. I glanced at Roland, who shrugged and took another sandwich from the plate. Mort ignored my question, clearly annoyed. "The images are jumbled, meaningless." Then he glanced up at me. "I wonder, is there possibly a block on your mind?" Roland paused mid-bite into his sandwich, and I just blinked at Mort. Probably. At this rate, nothing had surprised me." Mort and Roland exchanged a puzzled glance, then looked away sharply upon recognizing their moment of commiseration. "Oh, okay, I don't actually know what that means," I added. "A block, I mean." Mort sat back and said, "It's a very advanced spell that could have different effects. It's possibly the type of spell used to conceal away certain memories or even abilities." Thought about it for a moment. I mean, that kind of made sense. Maybe it was the former. And if that's the case, then why? What about the memory was so bad that it had to be concealed? Well, the thought was intensely disturbing. But I don't know how it would have gotten there. Another thought occurred to me. "Is there anything you can do?" Mort shook his head, unsatisfied. "No, this is beyond me, but you're in luck. I happen to know someone who might be able to help you." He reached into his pocket and took out his phone. "Like who?" I asked. "His name's Rysan," Mort answered, as he scrolled through his phone at what I assumed was his contacts. "His powers are of the mind. If what I assume is true, he'll be able to undo whatever was done to you." Roland frowned. "I've heard of him. He's kind of creepy, to be honest." Ignoring Roland's comment, I said, "So what you're saying is that he can read minds?" Well, that doesn't actually sound too bad. To be fair, I'd rather have someone mess around in my head for a missing memory than be dissected on some metal slab as some demonic science experiment. Mort paced around as he talked rather animatedly on the phone. It was evident that whoever was on the other end was someone Mort admires. After he was done, he came over and sat back down. "I have someone coming to pick you two up in about 30 minutes, he stated. Half an hour later, we heard a car pull up the driveway. Mort got up from the chair and, without hesitation, he opened the door. A young woman with shoulder-length black hair, brown eyes, and pale skin stood in the doorway. She wore a faded purple sweatshirt that was too big for her petite frame, with a picture of an anime I couldn't name. It almost ended right below the waist of her thin, albeit comfortable-looking black pants. She wore a leg holster strapped to her right thigh. I eyed the gun tucked inside for a brief moment, before meeting her eyes. She looked at Mort and smiled. "Hey, what's up, Mort? It's been a while," she said, and pulled him into a hug. "Yes, Layla, it has. You need to visit more often. It gets lonely around here," Mort said. "When I find time, you'll be the first one I call. So, these are the ones you told me about?" She held out her hand for me to take, and I shook it tentatively. "It's nice to meet you two. You ready to head out?" I think Mort saw hesitation in my face because he said, "Layla is one of Rysan's personal assistants and a longtime friend of mine. I trust her with my life." Layla just rolled her eyes. "You seriously give me too much praise, Mort," and she blushed. Roland grabbed his duffel bag and turned to look at me. "You ready to do this, Gav?" he asked. I nodded. Mort placed his hand on my arm. "Hold on, you two. I want to give you something before you go." He walked over to the fireplace and grabbed a small grey box with pretty carvings on it from on top of the mantel. He came back over to us and removed the lid. He took out 2 tiny octagonal-shaped charms with a weird symbol on both sides. They hung on a silver chain to be worn as a necklace. "What are they?" I asked. Roland took his out and put it on, and tucked it underneath his shirt. "They're charms imbued with a protection spell. Keep them on your person, don't lose them." After we said our goodbyes, Roland and I followed Layla to her Civic parked outside. "So, how long do you estimate we'll be on the road for?" Roland asked as he placed his duffel under him. "About 7 days by car," Layla replied. "But," she quickly added when she noticed the "Are you serious?" look on my face. "Why say screw that noise? I know a better way that'll get us there in no time at all." "What does that even mean?" I asked. "Oh, you're talking about a portal, right?" Roland exclaimed. I turned to him, open-mouthed. Holy crap. "Wait, are you serious? No frickin' way." "Well, that's exactly right," Layla nodded. She made a right turn and took the ramp to the freeway. I noticed that we were leaving town. Once we were off the freeway, I noticed they were renting somewhere outside of town that was empty and desolate. I don't know why, but I got an eerie feeling of being watched even as we drove by. Layla pulled up to the curb and turned off the engine right next to an old subway entrance. "We're here," she announced as the 3 of us got out. She threw her backpack over her shoulder and placed the key on the dashboard and locked the car. "Hold on, what are you doing?" I asked. I couldn't believe it. She's really going to leave this car here, out in the open, with the key inside. "What do you mean? We won't be needing it anymore." Layla started towards the stairs. "Come on, let's go." When we got to the bottom of the stairs, I saw Layla standing with her hand on her hip in front of a wall of graffiti-covered plywood that blocked the entrance. The place seemed abandoned, and by the looks of the aged wood, this place had been closed for a long time. She reached towards the wall with one hand, grabbed one of the boards and gave it a tug. It didn't seem like she gave it much effort at all, but instantly the boards pulled loose in one piece, and it opened up an avenue into the station. I assumed at one time this used to be a busy station. I envisioned people waiting to board the train. I glanced to my right, and I could make out an ornate mosaic tile on the walls that arched up toward the ceiling. Parts of it were covered in various advertisements, which were either torn or faded with age. There was garbage everywhere, and benches were overturned, and the thin glass around the booths was shattered and covered in spray paint and cobwebs. Layla walked over to the wide wall between the tracks. She opened her bag and took out a small bottle and sprayed silver mist onto a section of the wall that revealed a circular keyhole with weird-looking designs. "This is it." She placed the bottle back into her bag. "This is..." Suddenly Roland stood rigid in place. "Someone's coming this way," he whispered. Without saying anything, Layla kicked her bag underneath one of the benches and drew out her gun from its holster. She motioned for us to hide. A minute later, I saw it. A slouched-over figure dressed in thick brown and grey clothing moving out of the shadows. His face was caked in dry blood, framed by shaggy brown hair. His eyes were bright blue like the hottest part of the flame, and he flexed his long, bony fingers as his crusty lips curled back to show his razor-sharp teeth. Without a second thought, he lunged for her. She quickly dodged him and attempted to shoot him, but he dodged that in return. His next blow caught her off guard and she stumbled, just barely keeping her balance. He took that opportunity to grab her wrist and he squeezed hard. The pressure of his hold forced her to drop her gun. He kicked it away and it fell onto the tracks. He leaned in behind her and grinned from ear to ear. "Remember me?" he growled. "Samuel," Layla replied with a frown. Who the hell was Samuel? "You smelled so delicious and you're quite the fighter. I like that. I just knew that I had to have you, so I followed you. I'm going to have some fun with you and then..." Samuel put his mouth to her ear, and his words were too quiet for me to hear in on his conversation, but the expression on Layla's face told me enough. "I'm not edible, Jagoff," she grimaced. "Perhaps not a full meal, but maybe a light snack, I think." He crooned as he licked his lips. "No, I mean you would literally regret it," she said. "I'd give you a bad case of indigestion." "Now that's no way to treat a lady," said a deep, masculine voice from the other end of the station. And the voice was cold and menacing. Samuel moved so he was facing the source of the voice. "What the hell? Who's there? Who are you?" The voice chuckled. "There's really no need for introductions, and I'd hate to waste time on the formalities with someone who's already dead." The shadow shifted and a tall shape moved forward into the light. He was a lean man with light blonde hair and bright green eyes. He wore black pants and a black, long-sleeved shirt, and over them he wore some kind of leather harness that crisscrossed his chest, holding an assortment of blades and other carry-on weapons. He even had a gun strapped to his thigh, just like Layla. "Don't get cocky, you bastard," Samuel spat. "Stay back or I'll rip her apart like cotton candy." He slid his hand to her throat. His claws dug into her skin while his other hand stayed behind her back. "Oh, that's a bit melodramatic, don't you think?" the man quipped. He took a step forward and then another. "Fine," Samuel hissed. "Her death will be on your hands." Before the man reached them, Samuel brought back his arm and plunged his hand through Layla's back with a sickening sound, crushing bone and ripping past flesh and muscle. I watched in absolute horror as her eyes rolled back in her head and her chest split open. Her body gave one last twitch and then hung limp. Samuel retracted his arm and held her steaming, sopping wet heart in his hand with a smug and hungry look on his face. I clenched my hands into fists. My nails bit into my palms and I felt a sickening drop in my stomach. Damn it, I couldn't do anything but watch. Samuel casually took a bite out of it, and the blood ran freely down his chin. He smiled and dropped the organ onto the ground. He tossed her body in our direction like discarded trash. Her body slammed into the broken wall we were hiding behind. Layla's dead-eyed stare made my heart lurch. I felt a scream form in my throat, but Roland quickly clamped a hand over my mouth. The man in the vest narrowed his eyes. "Now it's your turn. Between the both of you, I'll have food to last me a week." He lunged forward, but before he could land a single blow, something jerked Samuel backwards. A black miasma took shape right behind him on the ground. 4 unnaturally long, pale arms wrapped themselves tightly around him as a slender, naked woman, I think it was a woman, rose from out of the darkness. Her face was blanketed by long strands of black hair. Suddenly Samuel released an ear-piercing screech that reverberated all around us. Roland and I plugged our ears and groaned in pain, but I managed to watch as the woman's bony fingers dug into his flesh. He clawed at her desperately, but it was futile. His flesh started to steam as it twisted and withered away. Blood seeped out of every orifice and pooled on the ground beneath them. His scream died and his body went limp. The woman pulled her arms away from him, and his body collapsed. This creepy, 4-armed woman disappeared back into the shadows. I blinked. What the fuck was that thing? Holy crap, that was scary as hell. The man grimaced and walked over to the dry husk that used to be Samuel, and reached into his pouch. From it he produced a small yellow vial. With a deft motion he poured the vial's contents over the body and then stepped back. Where the drops had hit its corpse, black smoke began to curl away. The smoke quickly spread horizontally until it cocooned the body entirely. In a few seconds the smoke dissipated, leaving an innocuous pile of dust behind. "You two can come out now," the man said. "It's safe. I was sent by my boss, Rice and Winters." I perked up at the name. Though I hesitated, thinking that staying hidden was a better option. Oh, what if that grudge-looking thing is still around? I don't want my skin to dry up like a prune. Is it a trap? Roland placed a hand on my shoulder and gave me a reassuring nod and stood up. He's fine, Gav. He's telling the truth. All right, whatever you say. I stood up from our hiding place, but before I could move away from the wall, I felt something tug at my pant leg. I glanced down and panicked. Holy shit, what the fuck? I babbled, almost incoherently. Layla squeezed my ankle, while her other hand came up to her face, just in case I decided to kick at her. Hey, stop that. Just calm down, will you? How the hell am I supposed to calm down, you freaking zombie? Oh my god, did this mean zombies exist? Roland quickly pulled me away from her as she slowly sat upright and groaned. Oh, God, that fucking sucked. That was my favorite sweatshirt, too. She glared up at me. And I'm not a zombie, okay? Just relax. Oh, so you're finally awake, the man said. He sauntered over and picked something up from the ground and examined it. Hey, Layla snapped at him. Quit playing with my heart, Oliver. Give it here. The man, Oliver, rolled his eyes and tossed the organ to Layla, who caught it easily. Be careful, you jerk. She unzipped her backpack and took out a jar. She placed her heart into it and placed it back into her bag. She took out a black jacket and put it over her sweatshirt to hide the gaping hole in her chest. She turned around and stomped over to the pile of dust. Damn it, Oliver. I really wanted to kill him. She pouted. Then she glanced down. Oh yeah, my gun. She hopped down to grab her gun off the tracks, as if she hadn't just had her heart ripped out of her chest a moment ago. Clearly that wasn't going to happen, Oliver scoffed. Oh, you're welcome, by the way. Layla flipped him the bird as she climbed back onto the platform. Okay, seriously, what the hell was that? I exclaimed. My job, Oliver stated simply. Okay, fine, keep your secrets, I thought. He took something small from his pocket. It was a key similar to Layla's. He placed the key into the keyhole and placed his other hand on the circle and moved it to a 90-degree angle, and then he pushed it in. For a moment, nothing happened. And then something, actually many somethings, clicked and slid into place on the other side. The wall in front of us cracked and popped as it began to ripple with bursting light. So cool, I breathed. Let's go. Oliver placed the key back into his pocket, and without another word he stepped through. I watched as the light swirled. Something smelled good. The three of us stepped through the swirling, ominous warmth, leaving the abandoned train station behind. Well, I don't know about you, but I'm delighted this story now has a third part, and long may it continue. Really, really enjoying this series, and think it just has such a beautiful universe to expand into. Well, thoughts, feelings, anything else you want to leave in the comment section, and I'll do my best as ever to reply to all of your comments. Yeah, I just really love the way that this one is developing. And a few more series to continue, wrap up maybe even. And I'll be doing that in the next couple of weeks, as ever. Something coming up tomorrow night, but something a little bit different, okay? So it's not going to be a continuation of a series for your Sunday evening special, but something else nonetheless. Well, that's it for me for this evening. Back again very soon. Till the next time, my dear friends. Very, very sweet dreams, and bye-bye.